Hello. Uh, for the okay. All right. Sorry for running a few minutes late. Um, uh, for the hour later move for the introduction, instructions, and meditation. Some stuff came up, but thanks for being flexible. I'll go ahead and do the introduction and instructions now. Um, so the introduction and instructions are going to be the same, relatively the same each time prior uh, to the hour marker when we formally start meditation. So if you need a refresher or anything like that, you can check in 15 minutes prior to the hour marker. And if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to ask in the chat. I'll get to what I can before we formally begin. So let's think about meditation and mindfulness as two different things. Meditation is a bigger and wider category of spiritual practices that include the practice of the technique of mindfulness. So, mindfulness is the practice of non judgmental awareness to whatever comes up and goes away in a given moment. Hey, Chris. Um, it is paying attention very intentionally to what is happening right now without grasping, without holding on to, or attaching to what happened, what happens, or what will happen. So, this practice involves focusing, noticing, and returning. That's three things. Focusing on what's happening in the present moment, noticing when our attention is strayed away from the stream of experience, and returning to what's happening right here and right now. The point isn't to find, eternal calmness or eternal relaxation, or when you do this, you're going to be tranquil every time, all the time. Um, Sometimes you're not going to have a good sit. Sometimes you're not going to have a good, so-called good mindfulness session. That's fine. That's kind of the point, actually. The point is to cultivate a steady core, no matter what the experience is. So if you experience distress, you're not doing it wrong or anything like that. It's a natural response to, and how that distress is managed is going to be different for every person. Um, so some quick instructions, and I know that my lighting's not great. I'm not used to this live streaming thing. If you have any pointers about lighting, I'm happy to hear them. I'll look stuff online too. Um, so in the Zen tradition, we place a lot of emphasis on posture. As you might notice, I'm sitting in a formal position on a mat and cushion. If you're interested in doing this, here's some important points to remember. Sit comfortably and straight. Your let me see. Your base is going to be. I'm sitting on a cushion. Some cushions. You want to sit on the front half or front third of your cushion. Your legs can be placed one in front of the other. So, like what I'm doing here. That's called the Burmese position. And if you're flexible, you can try what's called quarter, half, and full lotus. Quarter is up on a calf. Half is 1 foot is up on the thigh. And I can't do this, but if you're able to, the other foot will come up on the other thigh for a full lotus. If you're new, you probably just want to stick with Burmese, just 1 foot in front of the other. That's probably what you're most familiar with. So your right hand is going to be open, palm up. Left hand goes inside of there. Thumbs lightly touching. It's going to rest right about here on your navel. Your elbows, you're going to have about an apple's width of distance away from your body. Okay. So in terms of straightening your back, the idea is to be upright but without being stiff. So imagine some of you who have done choir or things like that, you might have heard this kind of imagery before. Imagine that there's a string pulling up from the crown of your head, but not tight, just straight and like very lightly taut, just to straighten you out a little bit. Your neck is going to be straight. Your chin is going to be pulling just a little bit slightly. Your eyes are going to be half open with that soft gaze, 45 degrees in front of you. You can close your eyes if you want, but it is easier to stay awake and to be mindful if you're aware of what's in your visual field, even if nothing's happening. It's really easy when you close your eyes to fall asleep. It's also very easy to kind of drift off and daydream, and it happens. But keeping your eyes open helps you remember that you're daydreaming, helps you notice when you're falling asleep a lot more than if your eyes are closed. So you don't have to sit like this. You can, if you have cushions, if you have mat and cushion, you can also sit seiza, which is basically just a kneeling version of this. Everything else is the same. You can also just sit in a chair. I do suggest sitting in a chair if you're going to sit down on something. Your positions are going to be the same. As I said before, you're going to keep your feet flat on the floor. You basically want a stable base. So sitting on a couch or a bed, you can do that. There's not like a rule against it. But the idea about the posture, especially within like my training and my tradition, is that the posture is part of the practice, and learning how to be still and stable, even while your body's doing different things, is a part of it. And to me, it's really important as part of like your bodily awareness. So I'm going to talk about what to do with the mind, and I'm also basically going to talk about what we're going to do with the breath. So we're going to be using the breath as an anchor for the practice. There are a lot of objects we can use. You might not be able to hear it, but for example, I live above a laundry room, so I can hear the washers and the dryers run. So I could use that. I could use visual objects. I could use a lot of different objects, but we're going to use the breath because that's readily available. It's always changing. It's never the same moment to moment, and it connects us to our body immediately. So pay attention to your inhalations and your exhalations. Notice what it feels like throughout different parts of your body when you breathe in. And it goes, say, past your upper lip, up your nose, nasal passages, down the throat, and it expands the chest and the diaphragm. Notice the gap between an inhalation and an exhalation. Then notice what it feels like throughout the different parts of the body when you breathe out. The reversal. So when it leaves the diaphragm, when it goes up the chest, when it leaves the throat, leaves the nasal passages, out the upper lip or your mouth or wherever it is that however it is that you're breathing. You don't need to breathe in any specific, special, particular way. Just breathe naturally. There's no need to force your breath. And if you find yourself forcing your breath to be a particular kind of way, that's actually a really interesting thing to notice, because you think that things should be a certain kind of way, and you tend to struggle a little bit in trying to make it different. And that's something worth noticing. So inhalation, exhalation, count that as one cycle. Count up to 10. If you lose count, go back to 1. Sometimes you might get to 1 and then you lose track. That's fine. Go back to 1. I have made it up to like 47 for some reason, and that's fine too. Just go back to 1. There's no doing this right or doing it wrong, other than practicing good posture, practicing returning, practicing focusing, noticing, and returning moment to moment, to notice when we're being mindful, when we're not being mindful, and to return every time that this happens. If you become distracted or your mind wanders, that's okay. Thoughts come and go. They're perfectly natural. They're like clouds floating across the sky or waves in an ocean. So, trying to stop your thoughts from happening, because sometimes there's an assumption that in meditation or mindfulness, the idea is to not think, or the idea is to get rid of the bad thoughts. That's not what we're doing. The idea is to be aware of them. The idea is changing our relationship to them. They're going to happen. They are natural. Trying to stop them is like trying to stop time. You're not going to, and you're just going to strain yourself and frustrate yourself trying to do that. So this practice is learning how to be mindful of what, how, and when thoughts come up and go away. And to cultivate, like I said earlier, that steady core of just being present to the patterns and the processes that shape our perceptions. So, on that note, I do want to make one note about discomfort. I think this is really important for me. If at any time you are uncomfortable, you're free to discontinue. There's a lot of reasons why things might be uncomfortable. Meditation and mindfulness can bring up trauma or trauma adjacent experiences. So if you find during practice that you are especially hyper aroused or especially hypo aroused, so either feeling super hyper vigilant or anxious, and you're totally unable to settle down, or you're feeling extremely numb or extremely listless and foggy, feel free to disengage. Utilize whatever methods you have to stabilize yourself and to make the environment feel safe again. You can try, for example, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding technique. It's 5 things you can see, 4 things you can feel, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. Find your window of tolerance and practice within that. Meditative practice can be emotionally cathartic. It can be uncomfortable. It often, for me, is kind of uncomfortable. But there's a difference between it being uncomfortable and sitting through and processing what that discomfort is and re traumatizing yourself. And we don't want that. There's a certain degree of discomfort that's perfectly fine and natural, and it's going to push you a little bit, and that's okay. But we don't want to, if something seriously bad comes up, like go and find what keeps you stable, go and do what you need to make sure that you don't fall back into that space. That's perfectly fine. So even people who are experienced with this technique are going to fall asleep. They're going to have a difficult time. They're going to wonder if they're doing it right. The body's going to hurt. You're going to feel bored. You're going to feel like, oh, I had a good moment here, and then everything else is bad. That's fine. Everything. This is all normal. This is all part of the process. This is all okay. Um, you might fall. You might see me fall asleep. I'll probably be bored at some point in the next 30 minutes. That's fine. The idea is focusing, noticing, and returning. Mindfulness meditation is simple, but not easy. So that's all the instructions. We're almost at the hour marker, so I'll give us an extra few minutes in case you need to adjust, grab something to drink. Go ahead and do that now. Please remember that meditation will be silent, with except for any ambient noises that might be coming through my mic in my apartment. So if there are certain aids that help you be mindful, like music or something like that, I know that's helpful for a lot of people. Please feel free to utilize them on your end. I'm not going to hear them anyway. I just want to provide a silent space where we could do this together and offer some instruction, all that kind of stuff. So we're almost at the hour marker. I'll give us an extra minute or two, so 2:01, 2:02, before I ring the bell to signal the start of the session, and then I'll ring it again at the end of the session. We'll be doing that for 30 minutes. Feel free to stay for as short or as long as you like. I will be doing a short reading and then chanting the vows afterward, which are in the description below. So I'll give us another minute or two so you can get set up. Okay, we will be starting now. Thanks, everyone, for your effort. I want to say two things really quick before I do the short reading. And I'm going to add this to my instructions later too, because I realized I haven't talked about this. One, it's a frequent thing that comes up, so I figured I'd mention it, being an introduction, instruction, stuff like that. Some of you might be wondering, how often should I practice this? How often, do I need to do 30 minutes every day or something? Um, every day would be great. 30 minutes every day would be awesome. But that's not going to happen. That's not always going to happen. That's not always realistic. People live different lives. Uh, so, even if it's like 2 minutes every day, 5 minutes every day, 10 minutes every day, whatever it is that you can do, whatever it is that fits in your schedule. Again, it's a push and pull. Part of it is going to be, if you want to create a new habit doing this, it takes some effort. There's some discomfort about how to fit that into your schedule and stuff like that. But the important thing is to make sure to do it every day, even if it's a little bit. So one way to think about this too is that you can do what some writers have called like micro moments of mindfulness, and this is really the key. It's one thing to do this for 30 minutes every day, or 10 minutes every day, or 5 minutes every day, like with dedicated time. It's another to this is a really good example, like especially during this time with coronavirus. Um, for example, they tell you don't touch your face, right? When you go outside and do stuff, don't touch your face. Try to avoid touching your face, but then you get an itch on your face. This comes up in meditation instructions and advice, like, hey, if your face itches, if something happens with your face, and you just want to go up and scratch it or fidget and stuff, just don't pay attention to it. What does it feel like to sit through an itch? What is it like to be completely mindful about an itch? I went grocery shopping right before this, and something got in my eye, and I was like, should I touch my face? Um, it wasn't fun, but I was kind of like, let's try not to touch my face. How does it feel like to have to work out something that got in your eye without touching your face and just moving your eye, but like really noticing what that discomfort feels like, what emotions come up for me of like, I would really like to just fix this. Um, Another thing that you can do in this time of coronavirus is, wash your hands for 20 seconds. Some say more than that, right? But at least 20 seconds. Um, some people go and figure out songs that they can do for 20 seconds, little licks that they can do for 20 seconds. For the musicians in the room, Dean Town by Wolfpack, that bass lick, about 20 seconds. But even just pay attention for those 20 seconds. What is it like? What does it feel like to wash your hands? What does it feel like to get in between? Just physical sensation. What does it feel like? What does it feel like when you want just to stop washing your hands and get it over with? What does it feel like when you're frustrated because you just want to just not have to do this all the time? What does it feel like when you have to remember to wash your hands for 20 seconds and while you're doing it? And what is the physical sensation of that? Those are like small times that you can practice this, and ultimately I think that's the really important thing, to integrate it into your daily life. Not so like it's important to do the formal times where you do this, but to integrate it in every step of the way, in everything you do is the really 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 important part. So I'll get off my cushion on that, and I'll do the reading, which is from if anybody else who's tuned in before, Pima Children's When Things Fall Apart. I felt it is rather appropriate for this time. This section is on meditation. The first thing that happens in meditation is that we start to see what's happening. Even though we still run away and we still indulge, we see what we're doing clearly. One would think that our seeing it clearly would immediately make it just disappear, but it doesn't. So for quite a long time, we just see it clearly. To the degree that we're willing to see our indulging and our repressing clearly, they begin to wear themselves out. Wearing out is not exactly the same as going away. Instead, a wider, more generous, more enlightened perspective arises. How we stay in the middle between indulging and repressing is by acknowledging whatever arises without judgment, letting the thoughts simply dissolve, and then going back to the openness of this very moment. That's what we're actually doing in meditation. Up come all the thoughts, but rather than squelch them or obsess with them, we acknowledge them and let them go. Then we come back to just being here. We simply bring our mind back home. After a while, that's how we relate with hope and fear in our daily lives. Out of nowhere, we stop struggling and relax. We stop talking to ourselves and come back to the freshness of the present moment. In practicing meditation, we're not trying to live up to some kind of ideal, quite the opposite. We're just being with our experience, whatever it is. If our experience is that sometimes we have some kind of perspective and sometimes we have none, then that's our experience. If sometimes we can approach what scares us and sometimes we absolutely can't, then that's our experience. This very moment is the perfect teacher and it's always with us. Is really a most profound instruction. Just seeing what's going on. That's the teaching right there. We can be with what's happening and not dissociate. Awakeness is found in our pleasure and our pain, our confusion and our wisdom, available in each moment of our weird, unfathomable, ordinary everyday lives. So thank you all for joining me. Thank you for your effort. Thanks for listening. I'm going to be chanting the 4 great Bodhisattva vows, which you can find in the description below, 3 times. And it's all monotone. If you want to join in, if you want, up to you. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. All right. Thanks, everyone. My schedule is posted below. If anything ever changes, I think most of you got my Facebook information. So thanks. Have a good one. Stay safe out there.